Hello and welcome back to American Cinema. We are at Lecture 4, the early 1960s. Now, this is a really pivotal time in America. With the election of JFK in 1960, we see a new young president. In many ways, America is at its peak at this point. The economy's doing great. James Bond films are appearing in the movie theaters. This is the era of Elvis and Marilyn Monroe, as you see depicted here next to me. Elvis went from being the rock and roll ruffian of the 50s. In the 60s, he signs up, he is recruited and drafted into the military and then starts appearing in movies, rather schlocky 60s Hollywood studio system movies. So a lot's going on. It's a very prosperous time. But in addition to that, many Americans aren't experiencing that prosperity, specifically African Americans. So this is the time of the civil rights movement when names like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King are making a name for themselves, fighting for the rights throughout the South. And these broadcasts of these protests and riots and even physical harassment and beatings by the police, they're all broadcast on TV, along with the Vietnam War. All of this is being broadcast on television news, which came of age in the 1960s. By the mid 60s, it went to color. And it had a dramatic effect on the audiences. Now they were seeing what was going on in Vietnam, seeing what was going on in the South during the civil rights struggle, and they didn't like it. It didn't seem like the America that they had come to know. So there's a lot of turmoil by the middle of the 60s, building to the late 60s. We see the Vietnam War escalate under Johnson, and we also see in Hollywood a lot of international influence coming in. In the 1950s, we saw the Italian neorealists come in and influence American cinema. And then in the early 60s, it's the French New Wave that is coming in and influencing the new generation of young auteurs and directors in Hollywood. The French New Wave is introducing a fresh, raw style of filmmaking that seems to break the conventional rules of Hollywood. And that's why it's so important. It's sort of the punk rock, if you will, of film movements in that it's throwing off the regular rules that we had come to accept as the only way to make a film. So let's get to the films that we are going to be covering. So the last thing to address here is that the studio system is really collapsing in this time. Lots of their big bloated productions after Ben-Hur, like Cleopatra, are failing, taking down the studio with it. They don't know what to do. They don't know what the younger generation wants. The older generation is staying home and watching TV. So they're really perplexed. And eventually, through the 60s, they will turn the reins over to the young generation of directors who seem to have the pulse of the young population. So, a couple of films that are big now. Number one, in 1960, Psycho. The key word, remember, with all the films this week, groundbreaking. Psycho is groundbreaking. It's the grandfather of all horror films. If you like horror, this is the genre and the film for you. A lot of the tropes that we come to associate with horror, like the final girl and slasher murders and so forth, this all began with Psycho and the famous shower scene. Up next, we have Dr. Strangelove, another groundbreaking film that really got America to, for the first time, laugh about the Cold War tensions that had been building through the 50s. It was a satirical film that really poked fun at the most serious issues of nuclear annihilation. And then lastly, we have Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, another groundbreaking film that covered interracial marriage and starred Sidney Poitier, a seminal black actor, a seminal actor from the 60s and 70s who this film got a lot of recognition, broke a lot of new ground, started a lot of conversation, and inspired a lot of people, including Jordan Peele, who you will hear from in the video compilation. He, of course, is the director of Get Out, and he talks about the relationship between the two movies. So that's a quick, brief summary. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and make sure you watch the video compilation and read your study guide, which covers all this in more detail. Reach out if you have any questions, and have a good week.